My name is Caroline Fraser, and I'm 29 years old. I'm a structural engineer by profession, but more than that, it's my way of seeing the world. For me, everything comes down to foundations. If the base is solid, the structure will stand. If it isn't, collapse is only a matter of time. For 3 years, I believe the foundation of my relationship with Luca was rock solid. He was 27, charming, ambitious, and passionate about fashion. He worked as a stylist's assistant and spent most of his free time trying to grow his presence online, posting reels, building outfits, dreaming of becoming an influencer. I thought supporting him was like pouring concrete for our future together. Strong, necessary, lasting. I bought him a high-end camera when his old one broke. I upgraded his editing software when he complained that free apps were too limiting. I even helped fund the designer pieces he used to craft his brand identity. I never thought of it as wasted money, it was an investment. Not just in him, but in us. When his 27th birthday came around, Luca had one wish, the ultimate luxury trip with his two closest friends, Marco and Dylan. They had found a resort in the Caribbean, 5 nights, all-inclusive white sand beaches and rooftop pools. The cost was obscene, just over $4,000 for the 3 of them. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money to Luca's account so he could book it. His excitement that morning as I dropped them off at the airport lit me up inside. Watching him stride into the terminal with that carefree grin made me feel like I had done something right, something good. The first few days were a highlight reel on my phone. Luca and his friends tagged me in stories, cocktails at sunset, matching shirts, clinking glasses by the pool. The captions were glowing, dream come true, and best girlfriend ever. Each time I sent back a little heart emoji playing my part as the supportive partner behind the scenes. On the 5th day, the morning they were supposed to fly home, my phone buzzed with a text. Luca. Hey, love. We're having the most amazing time. We're not ready for it to end. Dylan found a deal to upgrade our room and extend for another week. It's perfect. Can you send over another $1,500? That'll cover everything. Love you. I stared at the message. It wasn't the money, though, $1,500. Wasn't pocket change. It was the wording. There was no, could you know, would you mind? No trace of respect for the fact that this was my hard-earned money he was spending. It wasn't a request. It was a cheerful command, like I was his bank account with a pet name. Something inside me shifted cold and sharp. I didn't reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but then froze. Instead, I opened Instagram, my mind tugging at a memory. A few weeks ago, Luca had mentioned that a mutual acquaintance, Nia, would be staying at the same resort with her family. He'd brushed it off at the time, said she was just a professional friend. But the thought now felt off. I typed her name into the search bar. Her profile wasn't private. My pulse picked up as I tapped her story. And there it was. A shaky video from the resort's beach club posted just 10 hours earlier. Music pounding, lights flashing, a crowd moving as one. And in the center of it all, Luca. His arms draped around Nia's neck, her hands low on his waist, their bodies pressed close, swaying together in a way that stripped every excuse bare. There was nothing just friendly about it. Behind them, Marco was laughing with another woman, Dylan's lips locked to a stranger's. This wasn't a trip. It was a couple's retreat. And I was the one funding every last cocktail. The foundation of my life shifted beneath me, not in a roar of rage, but in the silent, devastating snap of steel under too much weight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even throw my phone across the room the way I imagine people do in movies when their heart shatters. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, cold and absolute. The kind of calm that comes right after a storm when everything is broken and you just stand there staring at the wreckage. I watched the video again. Luca's hand sliding over Nia's hip, her smile tipped toward him. The sight should have sent me into pieces, but instead it was like a wire in my brain. Snapped, leaving only silence. This wasn't about the $1,500 anymore. It wasn't even about the cheating, not exactly. It was about entitlement. About the way Luca had so seamlessly assumed my role was to bankroll his freedom, his pleasures, his double life. I wasn't his partner. I was his foundation, the invisible structure holding up the glossy facade he projected to the world. And I was done. I opened my laptop, my hands steady, though my stomach churned. A quick search confirmed what I already suspected. After 3 years living together, Luca had rights as a tenant even without a lease. If I tried to throw him out impulsively, he could fight back, maybe even win. No, that wasn't an option. So I found another. A formal notice to quit, 30 days notice required by law. Bland legal language, but every line was a scalpel cutting the cord that bound me to him. I filled out the form, my name and address, his the reason for termination, irretrievable breakdown of personal relationship. The words looked sterile on the screen, but they carried more weight than any screaming match could. Then I stood, walked to the bedroom, and was hit by the smell of him. His cologne lingering in the sheets, his shoes kicked lazily near the closet, the half-read book on his nightstand. For a heartbeat, my chest squeezed, and the urge to cry nearly broke through. But instead of collapsing, I went to the spare room, pulled out 3 of his large suitcases, and started packing. Not with anger, not with trembling hands, but with a precise, almost clinical focus. Shirts folded, shoes wrapped in old newspaper, his endless collection of styling products lined up in neat rows, each item tucked away as though I were an archaeologist documenting a civilization that had ended overnight. When I opened his bedside drawer, I froze. The small velvet box sat inside, the locket. I had designed it myself for our 2nd anniversary, a silver pendant engraved with the star pattern of the night we met. A one-of-a-kind creation for what I thought was a one-of-a-kind love. I lifted it, its weight suddenly obscene in my palm. I remembered how he had cried when I gave it to him, swearing he'd never take it off. How could something so full of meaning feel so empty now? I set it on my desk, snapped high-resolution photos from every angle, and filmed a short video of the engraving. Proof. Evidence. Record. Then I placed the locket back in its box, tucked it into his suitcase, and zipped it shut. By the time I finished, every trace of Luca's life was sealed in neat rows of luggage in the spare room. The apartment still looked lived in, his chosen art prints on the walls, his decorative throw pillows scattered across the couch, but it already felt like a ghost space. I returned to the living room, the notice to quit printed and waiting on the coffee table. I sat down and stared at it in the dim light, my pulse steady, my expression unreadable. I had built the foundation. I had carried the weight. Now I was preparing for demolition. The silence lasted 2 days. I didn't respond to Luca's text. I didn't comment on the last photos he tagged me in. I let the quiet grow thick between us until it was almost a presence in the room. Then the inevitable happened. My phone rang, his name flashing across the screen. "Hey, Cass!" His voice was bright, almost giddy. "We just landed. God, I'm exhausted. Can't wait to see you. I'll grab a taxi." I swallowed the taste of iron in my mouth. "All right," I said, my tone flat, stripped of warmth. "But when you get here, we need to talk." There was the smallest pause, just long enough for him to notice the edge in my voice. Okay. Is everything all right?" "You've been kind of quiet." "We'll talk when you get here," I repeated, and hung up. An hour later, his key turned in the lock. I was sitting on the couch, the living room dimly lit, every surface unnaturally tidy. He stepped inside, dragging his carry-on, his grin wide, until he saw my face. "Cass, what's going on? You're scaring me." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my phone, tapped the screen, and laid it on the coffee table in front of him. The video played silently. Luca on the beach, arms around Nia's neck, her hands roaming his waist. His body language left no room for denial. I watched his face shift in quick, stuttering phases, confusion, recognition, panic. Then the defenses clicked on. He laughed. Too quickly, too loud. "Oh, come on. That's Nia. You know about her. We were just dancing, Cass. You're seriously bent out of shape over a dumb video." I leaned back, my expression unreadable. It stopped being a trip the moment her hands were on your waist. "You're being insecure." He snapped, his tone rising. "You're letting your jealousy ruin my welcome home because I dared to have fun on the trip you sent me on." I let his words crash over me like waves against a seawall. When his voice finally fell into silence, I pushed the printed document across the table. He blinked. "What's this?" "A 30-day notice to quit," I said evenly. "Our relationship is over. I've packed your belongings. They're in the spare room. You have 30 days as required by law to find somewhere else to live." For the first time since stepping through the door, Luca's charm cracked. He stared down at the paper, his lips parting, then snapping shut. You're evicting me." "I'm terminating your residency," I corrected. "You have 30 days. He shoved the paper back toward me, his face hardening. "You can't be serious. You're not actually going to—" "I already did." His eyes narrowed, fury blooming. "Fine, I'll get my things now." He strode toward the spare room, but I stood stepping into his path. "No," I said, voice low but steady. "You can take what you need for the next few days. The rest, including your laptop, your designer bags. The locket will be available on the day you move out and return your key." His face twisted. "You can't do that. That's my stuff. My career is on that laptop. You're stealing from me. I'm not stealing, I said, my throat tight, though my voice stayed calm. I'm ensuring you leave peacefully and on time. Think of it as insurance. The muscles in his jaw jumped. You're insane. I'm done. The silence that followed was suffocating. For a second, I thought he might scream or throw something or force his way past me. But then he spun on his heel, grabbed his carry-on, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood there, the echo of it vibrating through the walls, my mask of calm finally splintering. My hands shook. My breath came fast and shallow. The demolition had begun. The first 3 days after Luca stormed out were eerily quiet. I almost let myself believe it would be simple, that he'd vanish from my life without a fight. I should have known better. On the fourth morning, my phone lit up with a flood of messages. Cass, please. I was drunk. It was stupid. You know I love you. Don't throw away 3 years over one mistake. I can't lose you. You're everything to me. I'll change. I'll do better. Just talk to me, please. Each word pressed against the raw wound in my chest. For a moment, I hovered over the reply button, the old instinct to soothe, to forgive, tugging at me. But then I remembered Nia's hands on his waist, the demand for $1,500, the smirk when he tried to gaslight me. I turned my phone face down on the table and walked away. Phase 1 sympathy. Tears, apologies, promises. I didn't answer. By day 6, the tone shifted. You can't legally hold my stuff. I talked to a solicitor. What you're doing is illegal. If you don't let me in to collect everything right now, I'll report you for theft. I sat at my desk, composed a formal email, and attached a photo of the notice to quit he'd signed. Your property will be returned in full upon termination of your residency on the date specified. Until then, you may collect personal essentials only. This is in compliance with UK tenancy law. Caroline Fraser. No warmth, no cracks, just process. Phase 2 threats. The next day, I woke to see Luca's friends Marco and Dylan tagging me in cryptic posts. Toxic women love to punish men who give them everything. Some people can't handle seeing their partner shine. Then came the DMs. Controlling witch. Jealous freak. You're ruining his life because you're bitter. I deleted each one, screenshotted for evidence, moved on. But Luca wasn't done. Phase 3 proxy. It was my mother who called, her voice tight with confusion. Cass, sweetheart, I just had the most disturbing call from Luca's mum. My stomach dropped. What did she say? She claimed you had some sort of breakdown, that you threw him out with nothing but the clothes on his back, that he lent you a large sum of money you're refusing to repay. She even hinted you've been unstable since your father passed. Her words hit like a slap. The air left my lungs. My father's death. Luca knew how raw that still was, and now he'd weaponized it, using his mother as the blade. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. And you believed her? A pause. Then my mother's voice softened, firm with conviction. Not for a second. I know my daughter. But Cass, he's trying to smear you. You need to be careful. That night I sat alone in the half-dark apartment, my head pounding. This wasn't just about getting him out anymore. It wasn't just about the legalities. It was about the story. Because Luca wasn't fighting to stay, he was fighting to rewrite what happened. To twist me into the villain and himself into the poor betrayed lover. And if there's one thing I've learned as an engineer, it's that when foundations fail, the collapse isn't random. It follows a pattern. I could already see the cracks spreading, the lies forming their own fragile structure. My job now was to ensure his false narrative collapsed before it could stand. Day 30 arrived like a sentence being carried out. For a month, the flat had been a battlefield. Not with shouting matches or broken dishes, but with silenced texts, veiled threats, and the constant pulse of dread. I hadn't slept in our bed once. The scent of his cologne still clung to the sheets, and I couldn't bear to lie in it. I'd been living on the couch, sustained by coffee and grim determination. Every message, every call, every insult I logged, it time-stamped, screenshot, archived. My armor was documentation. That morning I opened the blinds wide. The pale light fell across the neat stacks of Luca's luggage lined up in the spare room like soldiers waiting for deployment. I had printed an inventory of every item down to his cufflinks and chargers. I wasn't giving him a single opportunity to twist the story. At noon sharp, the knock came. I opened the door to find Luca, his jaw-tight eyes burning with restrained fury. Beside him stood his father, a tall, weary man with sadness etched into every line of his face. He barely met my gaze, like he didn't want to be here. Behind me in the hallway stood Graham, my colleague and friend, calm, neutral clipboard in hand, my chosen witness. No one spoke as Luca stepped inside. His father trailed behind him while Graham leaned against the wall with deliberate casualness. The air was heavy, suffocating. "This is ridiculous," Luca muttered, his voice sharp as glass. "You turned our home into some courtroom." I didn't rise to it. I simply led him to the spare room and gestured at the neatly stacked suitcases. "Your belongings, as agreed." He yanked open one case, rifling through his movements, jerky and hostile. Clothes, shoes, the laptop, everything was there. His fingers brushed the small velvet box. He froze, then shot me a look so venomous it almost made me flinch. "You even packed the locket." His voice dripped with contempt. "The one you made me? Do you have any idea how pathetic this is? Packing up a life like it's just clutter." My throat tightened, but I forced my voice steady. "It was never about the object, Luca. It was about the story behind it. That story's finished." He laughed bitterly, slamming the suitcase shut. "You think you're so clever. Cold. In control. But you're just bitter Cass. A sad little woman no one will ever love again." I didn't answer. I handed him the inventory sheet and a pen. "Sign, please, acknowledging you've received everything." He stared at the paper like it was poison. His father, silent until now, stepped closer, his voice low, almost pleading. "Just sign it, son. Let's go." For a moment I thought Luca might refuse, but then with a violent scratch of pen against paper he scrawled his name. Graham added his signature as witness. Luca slammed the pen down, pulled the key from his pocket, and dropped it onto the counter with a sharp metallic clink. That sound small final echoed louder than any door slam ever could. Without another word, he grabbed a suitcase handle and stormed out. His father followed, giving me one fleeting look, a mix of apology and resignation, before the door shut behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was truly mine again. I stood there for a long while, the key still resting on the counter, my hands trembling, my chest hollow. The war was over, but the wreckage remained. I had won. But God, it didn't feel like victory. For 2 weeks after Luca left, I lived in a kind of suspended quiet. No messages, no harassment, no more slammed doors. I cleaned the flat from top to bottom, scrubbing every trace of him from the walls, the floors, the air itself. I rearranged the furniture, shifted the bed to a new angle, bought new sheets in a color he would have hated. Each act was small, but together they felt like reclaiming square inch after square inch of myself. Still, the silence was not peace. Not yet. Because I knew Luca wasn't done, not really. He would keep painting me as unstable, controlling cold. And if I didn't tell my story, his would be the only one left standing. So I picked up the velvet box again. The Polaris locket, my design, my symbol of love, now nothing but a parody of what it was meant to be. I opened my laptop and began to write. The post wasn't on Facebook or Instagram, the battlegrounds Luca loved. No, I chose my professional portfolio site, the space where my work lived, where every project told a story. Title: The Polaris Locket, a study in sentimental design and false foundations. I uploaded the high-resolution photos I had taken, the sketches, the renderings, the notes from the artisan I'd collaborated with. I detailed how the locket was created to represent a night sky, a promise of trust, a shared future. And then I told the truth, not with venom, not with insults, but with precision. An object like this is only as true as the story it represents. This locket was designed as a North Star, a guiding light for honesty and loyalty. But it has since come to symbolize something else, the collapse of a foundation built on deception. Trust can be broken. Stories can be false. Yet art remains, and when the meaning is gone, the piece itself must be reclaimed, its story rewritten. I ended the post with one line that was equal parts farewell and declaration. The Polaris locket was safely returned to its recipient. Its story is his to tell now. Mine is one of resilience, of moving on, of building stronger foundations. I hit publish. At first silence, then slowly ripples. The artisan I had worked with shared the post, adding, "Every design has a story. This one is unforgettable." My colleagues on LinkedIn left quiet notes of support, beautifully written, powerful, brave. And Luca's world, his friends, the same ones who had mocked me online, started distancing themselves when the debt collectors came knocking for the resort trip they'd expected me to bankroll. Nia disappeared from his feed overnight. His carefully curated image of happy victim collapsed under the weight of my calm, undeniable truth. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't insulted. I had simply told my story and let it stand unshakable. It wasn't victory in the way I once imagined. It didn't make the pain vanish, but it was enough. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the ground under me steady again. The flat was mine again. Not the ghost house it had become in the weeks after Luca left heavy with his scent and his chaos, but mine. I would come home from work, kick off my shoes, and feel no tension creeping in from the walls. No dread about what mood he'd be in, no half-truths, no empty promises, just quiet. Some nights the quiet felt like a balm. Other nights it was unbearable, pressing down on me until I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Healing, I was learning, is not a straight line. I caught myself replaying old memories. Luca laughing in the kitchen. Luca's hand on the small of my back. Luca crying when I gave him the locket. For a moment I'd ache for that version of him before I remembered the truth. That version was never real. He was a facade built on sand, and I had been the foundation holding it up. Now at least the facade was gone. One evening I sat at the kitchen table with my sketchbook. The page stared back at me blank, expectant. My pencil hovered, and for the first time since the break I felt the urge to create. But not a locket, never again a locket. Instead I began to draw a bridge. Not a delicate ornamental one, but something massive, strong, a design meant to withstand storms with foundations driven deep into bedrock. Each line steadied me, each calculation on the margin reminding me of who I was when Luca wasn't bleeding me dry. I realized that this was what I wanted my life to be now. Not fragile symbols of romance, not illusions dressed up as promises, but structures that endured. Honest, resilient, mine. I closed the sketchbook and pressed my palm to the cover, a small smile ghosting across my face. The scar of what I'd been through was still there. I knew it would always be there. But scars are proof of survival, not defeat. For 3 years, I thought Luca was my North Star. But stars I'd learned can lie. It's the